still remember the smell of burnt coffee that morning, sharp, bitter, like the taste of a truth I didn't want to swallow. The kitchen felt colder than usual, though the sun was streaming in through the big windows that overlooked the vineyard. Rows of vines shimmered in the light, green and endless, the same view Ethan and I used to call our forever. That word doesn't mean much now. He was standing by the counter, phone in hand, thumb hovering over the screen like he couldn't decide whether to press send or delete. He wasn't wearing his wedding ring. That was the first thing I noticed. The second was that suitcase beside his chair, the one I'd packed for our honeymoon 15 years ago. "Ethan," I asked quietly, "what's going on?" He looked up, startled, almost guilty. Then his face rearranged itself into that calm, practiced mask, the one he used at business meetings and family dinners, the one that always made me feel like I was on trial. "Claire, I've been meaning to talk to you," he said, voice soft, rehearsed. I knew that tone. It was the tone doctors used before giving bad news. "About what?" He sighed and rubbed his temples. "About us, I don't feel it anymore. We've been stuck for a long time, you know it too." My stomach twisted. "Stuck? Ethan, we've had a rough year, that's not being stuck, that's life." "No," he said quickly. "You don't understand, I feel suffocated. Every day here it's the same, the vineyard, the schedules, the meetings, you've changed." Those two words hit harder than anything else he could have said. "You've changed, Claire." Changed, of course I had changed. My father had died. I'd been holding this business together while he took breaks that somehow always ended at the golf club or downtown bar. But he didn't mean that kind of change. He meant the kind that made me less convenient. "So what are you saying?" I whispered. He didn't answer right away. His phone buzzed and his eyes flicked down to it. I saw the name flash for half a second before he flipped it face down. "Mila." My chest went tight. That name, I'd seen it before in his messages. Work friend, just someone from the gym, always an excuse, always a lie dressed up like logic. "You're leaving," I said quietly. He swallowed. "I think it's best for both of us." The sound that came out of me didn't feel human. A mix of disbelief, fury, grief, the kind of noise your heart makes when it finally breaks all the way through. "You're really walking out on 15 years, Ethan, just like that." He looked away. "It's not like that." "Then how is it?" He didn't answer. He grabbed the suitcase, zipped it shut, and stood there like a man waiting for applause for a performance he knew was mediocre. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to make him feel the way I felt, but I didn't. My father used to say, "Never raise your voice to someone who's already decided to stop hearing you." So I just stood there and watched as he opened the door, sunlight spilling around him. For one insane second, I thought he might turn around, that he'd see the house we'd built, the vineyard that carried both our names, and remember what we used to be. He didn't. He just said, "You'll be okay, Claire, you always are." And then he left. The sound of the car engine fadding down the gravel road was the loneliest music I've ever heard. The next few hours blurred. I don't even remember sitting down, but somehow I ended up on the kitchen floor beside the counter, holding the coffee mug I'd made for him. The steam was gone and the coffee was cold, just like everything else. That's when I saw it, his wedding ring, sitting on the table next to the phone charger, not lost, not forgotten, left. I stared at it until the tears blurred it into a gold smudge. My mind kept repeating his words on loop. "You've changed, Claire." No, I hadn't changed. I'd just grown up while he stayed selfish. By noon, the news had already started spreading. That's the thing about small towns, gossip travels faster than sunlight. The vineyard workers kept their heads down, whispering as I passed. At the grocery store, Mrs. Pollard from down the road gave me that pitying smile people reserve for funerals. "I'm so sorry, dear," she said. "I heard Ethan taking some time away." I forced a smile, something like that. What I wanted to say was, he's with a 26-year-old who teaches yoga and posts quotes about alignment while wrecking someone else's life. But I didn't. I had my father's name to protect and the vineyard he trusted me with. That evening I poured myself a glass of our Cabernet and walked out to the fields. The vines stretched endlessly, their leaves trembling in the warm breeze. This place was supposed to be our legacy, my father's dream that he passed down to both of us. But now it was just me. I knelt and touched the soil. "I'll keep it alive, Dad," I whispered, "even if I have to do it alone." That promise became my heartbeat. The first week after Ethan left, the house felt like an abandoned stage. Everything still looked the same, the photos, the furniture, even his jacket still hanging behind the door, but the air had changed. The silence had weight now. It pressed against me when I walked through the halls. Every morning I woke up and for a few seconds forgot he was gone. Then I'd turn and see his side of the bed untouched, the pillow perfectly smooth, and the truth would hit me again like a slap. The hardest part wasn't that he'd left, it was how easily he'd done it. I was in the vineyard, checking the irrigation lines, when I saw two of the workers, Marco and Leela, whispering by the old oak. Their voices dropped when I approached. Leela smiled too brightly. "Morning, Mrs. Bennett," she said quickly. "Beautiful day, huh?" I nodded, pretending not to notice the way Marco avoided eye contact. I'd spent enough years managing people to know when my name was the subject of conversation. By noon, I'd heard it again, from the delivery driver, from the woman at the post office, even from my accountant who called just to check in. Everyone was talking about Ethan and her. The story changed depending on who told it. Sometimes Mila was a model, sometimes a business consultant. Sometimes Ethan was finding himself, other times planning to sell his share of the vineyard. But every version had the same ending. I was the wife left behind. That title burned. That afternoon, I sat in my office at the vineyard, the same office my father had once ruled from like a king, going through invoices when something odd caught my eye. The numbers didn't add up. There were transfers from our main account, not huge but consistent, quiet withdrawals that didn't match any vineyard expenses. They'd been happening for months. I scrolled through, my heart pounding faster with every line. Every withdrawal was approved by Ethan. "You've been planning this," I whispered to myself. "You were already gone before you left." I printed the statements, feeling my hands shake. My father used to say, "Money tells the truth people hide." If that was true, then the truth was ugly. The call came that evening, just as the sun was setting over the vines. Unknown number. I almost didn't pick up. "Mrs. Bennett," a deep voice asked. "Yes, this is Charles Dalton, your father's estate lawyer. I know it's been some time since your father's passing, but there are matters that require your attention." I frowned. Matters? I thought everything was settled years ago. It was for the most part, but there's a clause in the inheritance that's time-sensitive. It's coming into effect soon. My stomach tightened. What clause? It concerns ownership of the vineyard. Specifically, what happens if one of the inheritors, you or your husband, renounces the marriage or partnership? I froze. "I'm sorry, what?" "Your father added a stipulation. If the marriage dissolved or if your husband acted against the family interest, certain assets would revert to your control, and others to a trust you may not be aware of." "Why would my father do that?" I whispered. Charles sighed softly. "He was a cautious man. He trusted you, but he didn't entirely trust your husband." I felt something between shock and a bitter kind of vindication. My father had seen it coming. "You'll want to come by the office," he continued. "There are documents to sign, and well, I believe you'll find some of it quite surprising." I hung up and just sat there for a long minute, staring out the window at the vines, the sky glowing pink and gold. Ethan always said my father never liked him. Now I realized maybe my father didn't need to. He'd already protected me in the one way he knew how. Later that night my phone buzzed, a message from Ethan. "Hope you're doing okay, just checking in." No apology, no explanation, just checking in. I stared at the screen, my pulse pounding in my ears. Then I saw it, the little profile picture beside his name. Him and Mila, smiling, sunlight hitting her hair like a commercial for Betrayal. I typed 3 words. "Don't text me," and hit send. Seconds later the typing bubble appeared, then disappeared, then again. Finally a message came through. "Claire, you'll regret turning cold. Things are changing soon." I didn't reply, but a chill ran down my spine. After midnight, unable to sleep, I wandered into my father's old study. The room smelled faintly of cedar and old books. His desk still held traces of him, an old fountain pen, a faded photograph of my mother, and a drawer that had always been locked. Except tonight it was. Inside was an envelope, my name written in my father's careful, slanted handwriting, "For Claire to be opened when the time is right." My hands trembled as I unfolded the letter. My dearest Claire, if you're reading this, something in your life has changed, something that tests your strength. I trust that you'll find your way, but I also want you to know, the vineyard will always be yours, no matter who tries to claim it. I've seen enough to know who deserves to carry the Bennett name forward. There are things you don't yet know about the family estate, things your husband may not have told you. Mr. Dalton will explain the rest when the time comes. Remember, loyalty is what people say when you're watching, it's what they do when they think you are. I stared at that last line for a long time, then folded the letter and locked it back in the drawer. Because I knew then, whatever Ethan thought he'd taken from me, he'd underestimated what my father left behind. 2 weeks after Ethan left, the world had stopped feeling real. Days blurred into one another, early mornings spent walking the vineyard alone, long afternoons balancing the books, and sleepless nights staring at the ceiling, wondering what I'd done wrong. Except deep down, I knew I hadn't done anything wrong. Ethan had simply found someone easier to impress. But knowing that didn't make it hurt less. The vines were just beginning to flower, the promise of the new season hanging heavy in the air. My father used to say, "Spring doesn't care who broke your heart, it blooms anyway." That morning I decided to follow his advice, focus on work, not wounds. I had no idea that day would bring her to my doorstep. It was around 11 a.m. when I heard a car crunch up the gravel driveway, a white convertible, shiny, expensive, and out of place among the dusty vineyard trucks. I stepped out of the tasting room, clipboard still in hand, squinting against the sun. The woman who stepped out was almost too polished for reality, tight cream dress, designer sunglasses, blonde hair that looked like it had its own stylist. And then she smiled, that bright, confident, obliviously cruel kind of smile. "Hi, you must be Claire." Her voice was light, airy, and terribly familiar. I didn't need an introduction. I'd seen her face enough times on Ethan's phone. "Mila," I said flatly. She blinked, surprised I knew. "Oh, wow, I wasn't sure if, well, I guess you found out." "Guess I did." She gave a nervous laugh and adjusted her purse strap. "I hope this is weird. I just thought, since things are different now, we could maybe talk, woman to woman." I stared at her for a long moment, part of me too stunned to even be angry. Then I stepped aside. "Sure," I said quietly, "let's talk." We sat on the terrace overlooking the rows of vines. She crossed her legs delicately, like she was posing for a magazine shoot. I poured us both water, though she looked disappointed it wasn't wine. "I know this must be hard," she began, her tone soft, rehearsed. "Ethan, been through a lot. He didn't want to hurt you." "He managed," I said dryly. She smiled, missing the edge in my voice. "He said you were strong, and honestly, he still cares about you. He talks about you all the time." That made me laugh, a short, bitter sound. "Does he talk about the part where he emptied our savings too?" That threw her off, her eyebrows twitched. "Savings? Don't play dumb, Mila. You think he's rich? That money he's spending on hotels and handbags, it came from my father's business." Her lips parted. I watched the truth dawn on her, slow, hesitant, like a candle flickering to life. Then she composed herself again. "Ethan said the vineyard was his too, that he helped build it." I met her eyes. "Did he also tell you whose name is on every deed, every license, and every barrel, because it isn't his?" She froze. That silence told me everything I needed to know. Mila might have been young, but she wasn't stupid. She was beginning to realize she'd joined the wrong side of a sinking ship. "Why did you come here, Mila?" I asked finally. "To gloat, to see the wife you helped break?" Her voice softened. "No, I came because he's different lately. Secretive, distracted. He's been taking calls at night, leaving for hours. He says it business, but," she hesitated, "I think something going on, and I thought you should know." That surprised me. I sat back studying her. "Why tell me?" "Because I think he's lying to both of us." She reached into her purse and pulled out her phone, opened the gallery, handed it to me. The picture showed Ethan sitting in a cafe, not with Mila, not with anyone I recognized. A woman in a grey suit sat across from him, papers spread on the table between them. Ethan was smiling, that sharp, confident smile he used to wear when sealing a deal. "Who's that?" I asked. "He said she's a lawyer," Mila said. "Something about transferring assets, but when I asked he got defensive." I felt a strange chill. When was this? 3 days ago in the city. 3 days ago, right before that text he'd sent me, "You'll regret turning cold. Things are changing soon." I felt the pieces start to form a shape. The vineyard, the withdrawals, the inheritance clause. Ethan wasn't just moving on, he was planning something. "Mila," I said slowly, "if you're smart you'll stay far away from him." "I tried," she whispered, "but he said there's money coming soon, enough for both of us." That's when I felt it, that old, familiar ache of betrayal mixing with something sharper, fury. "Get in your car," I told her quietly. "Go home, and if Ethan calls, tell him you haven't seen me." Her eyes widened. "Why, what's happening?" "Because I think he's about to make the worst mistake of his life." When she finally drove off, the vineyard felt too quiet again. The wind moved through the vines like whispers, and I stood there, heart pounding. I went inside, poured a glass of wine, and sat at my father's desk again. His letter lay in the drawer, the one that said, "There are things you don't yet know about the family estate." I took it out and read it again. Every word suddenly felt heavier, sharper. There was something here my father hadn't told me, something Ethan had somehow found out. And if I didn't uncover it first, I might lose everything. 2 days after Mila's visit, I drove into town to meet with Charles Dalton, my father's old lawyer. The drive itself felt surreal, the same winding road I'd taken with my father so many times as a child. Back then, I'd sit in the passenger seat, legs swinging, listening to him talk about the vineyard like it was a living thing that needed care, not control. Now I was heading into town to find out how much of that living thing I might lose, or already had. Charles's office was tucked inside an old sandstone building downtown, the kind that smelled of paper, ink, and slow secrets. He greeted me with that calm, deliberate politeness only lawyers seem to perfect, a tall man with silver hair and eyes that seemed to read more than I said. "Mrs. Bennet," he said warmly, gesturing for me to sit, "I appreciate you coming on such short notice." "You said it was urgent," I replied, setting my bag down, "something about a clause in my father's will." He nodded and opened a thick leather file folder with my father's name embossed on the spine. "Your father was a careful man, and frankly a brilliant one. Before his passing, he structured the estate to ensure that the vineyard, the Bennet legacy, would remain under the stewardship of someone he trusted completely." "Meaning me," I said quietly. "Yes, but he added specific terms in case your marriage ever compromised that stewardship." "Compromised," I repeated. "How exactly?" He flipped a page. "Your father was aware that your husband, Mr. Ethan Bennet, had shown interest in certain financial and legal aspects of the vineyard, specifically its export arm. He was concerned Ethan might attempt to take control." "He wasn't wrong," I murmured. Charles smiled faintly. "Then you'll appreciate his foresight. According to the clause, if at any point Ethan filed for divorce or transferred any part of the business without your co-signature, his rights to all marital and vineyard assets would automatically revert to you." I froze. "Wait, revert? You mean I would get everything?" "Precisely. The vineyard, the estate, accounts, the equipment, even the city property linked to the brand. In essence, he forfeits his claim entirely." My pulse thudded in my ears. "And Ethan doesn't know this?" "He might. The document was public record, but I doubt he ever read the fine print. Your father hid it within a secondary trust document, buried under a confidentiality clause. Only upon dissolution of the marriage does it activate." I leaned back in my chair, trying to process. So Ethan hadn't just walked away from me, he walked away from everything. "Charles," I said slowly, "you mentioned this clause was time-sensitive." He nodded. "Yes, it only applies if the dissolution occurs before your 15th wedding anniversary." "And that's in 3 months," he finished for me. I sat there, gripping the armrests. 3 months. Ethan had left just in time to trigger the clause if he filed for divorce. But if he didn't know what the clause meant, then he might believe he still controlled the assets. A sharp realization hit me. That woman in the cafe, the lawyer Mila saw, she wasn't just transferring money. Ethan was probably trying to move or sell part of the business before the clause activated, before the inheritance sealed it under my name. And he didn't realize he was legally powerless to do it. "So what happens now?" I asked. "Do I just wait?" "Not quite," Charles said. There's another stipulation, one your father wrote in his own handwriting. He called it the confirmation clause. It requires a personal verification by you, here in this office, before the transfer is finalized. In short, you must sign one final document to make it official. And if I do, then technically the vineyard remains in limbo, still partially under Ethan's name, vulnerable to manipulation. I nodded slowly, then we sign. Charles brought out a single-page document. The words Estate Confirmation, Bennett Holdings, were typed neatly at the top. My father's signature sat faintly at the bottom, faded but unmistakable. He handed me a pen. Your father designed this to be simple, one signature and your inheritance becomes immutable. I stared at the paper for a long time. It felt heavier than it looked, like the weight of every year I'd poured into the vineyard, every sleepless night spent saving it, every betrayal I'd survived. Then I signed. The moment my pen left the page, something shifted inside me. Not relief, not yet, but clarity. A deep, cold understanding of what I had to do next. You've secured your father's legacy, Charles said softly. But be careful, Mrs. Bennett. When people realize what they've lost, they don't always let go quietly. I drove back to the vineyard under a low, bruised sky. The air felt heavy, thick with oncoming rain, somewhere in another town or another hotel. Ethan probably thought he was winning. He had no idea he'd just lost everything. But I wasn't naive. Men like Ethan, they don't accept defeat, they turn it into vengeance. That night, as thunder rolled across the hills, I found myself back at my father's desk again. The lamplight flickered over the letter he'd written me, the one that ended with, "Loyalty isn't what people say when you're watching, it's what they do when they think you are." I ran my fingers over the ink, whispering to the empty room, "You were right, Dad, you always were." Then my phone buzzed. It was an email, no sender name, no subject line, just a PDF attachment titled Transfer Proposal, Bennett Holdings. My stomach dropped. I opened it and saw Ethan's name on the document. He was trying to sell part of the vineyard's brand to an investor group, in his name only. And the proposal date, yesterday. I didn't sleep that night. The rain hammered against the windows, wind howling through the vines like the ghosts of every broken promise Ethan ever made. That email burned in my mind, the unsigned proposal, the investor names I didn't recognize, the bold arrogance of him thinking he could sell my father's vineyard. By 3 a.m., I was sitting in the office with a cup of cold coffee and the letter from Charles Dalton open beside me. If Ethan wanted a war, he was about to get one. Only this time, I wasn't the naive wife who believed in partnership. I was the daughter of Robert Bennett, and my father didn't raise me to surrender. The proposal had 3 signatures at the bottom: Ethan's, a corporate lawyer named Jason Trent, and an investor group called Linden Oaks Holdings. I did some digging. The name sounded familiar. Then it clicked. Linden Oaks was the same group that had tried to buy the vineyard 5 years ago before my father died. He refused them outright. They'll gut the land for profit, he told me. They don't see vines, they see numbers. Now Ethan was trying to sell to them. I forwarded the document to Charles with a short message. He's making a move. What are my legal options? Then I printed the proposal and laid it on the table beside a photo of my father. His smile in that picture, proud, calm, looked almost like approval. "Don't worry, Dad," I whispered. "I'll handle it." The next morning I called Marco, one of the senior vineyard hands, someone who'd worked with my father for 20 years. Quiet, loyal and smarter than people gave him credit for. When he arrived, I showed him the document. "Do you know if anyone from the investor group has been here lately?" I asked. He frowned. "Now that you mention it, a man in a black Mercedes came by last week, said he was from a wine distribution firm, spent about an hour with Ethan in the tasting room." "Did he say his name?" "Trent, Jason Trent." That confirmed it. "Marco," I said, leaning forward, "I need your help, but you can't tell anyone, not even the others." He nodded immediately. "Anything, Mrs. Bennett." "I need to know everything Ethan's been doing behind my back. Every call, every visitor, every file he's accessed in the vineyard systems. Quietly." "You got it." As he left, I felt something I hadn't felt since Ethan walked out. Control. That afternoon, I called Charles again. If Ethan tries to sell a part of the business under his name, I asked, what happens legally? If the sale is signed, it would technically be invalid, since your confirmation nullified his ownership. But if investors don't know that, and money changes hands, it becomes complicated. Complicated how? Fraudulent on his part, but it could take months to unwind in court. The best strategy is to let him think he's succeeding, until you can prove the sale was void from the start. I smiled. So you're saying I should let him walk into his own trap? Charles hesitated, then smiled back. In essence, yes. 3 days later, I received a call I wasn't expecting. Claire, that voice, smooth, low, familiar. Ethan. I took a breath before answering. What do you want? We need to talk, he said. I've been doing a lot of thinking, and maybe we can work something out. I almost laughed. You mean now that the money's involved? No, Claire, it's not like that, he said quickly. I just think we shouldn't rush into lawyers. It's bad for both of us. We built this life together. Maybe there's a way to end things cleanly. No fighting. Every word was rehearsed. He was fishing. All right, I said carefully. Let's meet at the vineyard tomorrow at noon. Really? Yes, I'll have the documents ready. What documents? The ones you've been trying to sell. The pause on the line was long enough to confirm everything. Then he cleared his throat. I don't know what you're talking about. Of course you don't, I said. See you tomorrow. The next day the sky was clear, deceptively calm. Ethan arrived right on time, stepping out of his new car like he still owned the place. Tan, smiling, reeking of expensive cologne and guilt. You look good, he said, scanning me. Vineyard suits you. It always did, I replied. Let's get to it. We went into my office. I had 2 stacks of papers on the desk, the fake copies of the vineyard's sale proposal and the real inheritance confirmation from my father's trust. Ethan eyed the documents warily. What's this? Your mess, I said, and my insurance. He laughed softly. Still dramatic, I see. Still dishonest, I see. He smirked. Claire, this isn't personal. You're not cut out for this business. You never were. You hide in sentiment and tradition, but this is about growth, expansion, profit. And betrayal, I added. Betrayal, he laughed again. It's business, Claire. You'll thank me someday. Maybe, but for now, I slid one of the papers across the table. Sign this. He looked down. What is it? An acknowledgement of your withdrawal from Bennett Holdings. It states that you agree to forfeit your remaining share. It'll make things clean, like you said. He smiled, that smug, confident grin. Fine, if it keeps you from causing trouble. He signed it without reading. As he handed it back, I met his eyes. Congratulations, I said softly. You just gave up everything. His brow furrowed. What? You didn't read it, I said, sliding the second page toward him. Because you never read anything, Ethan, not the contracts, not the fine print, not even my father's will. He snatched the paper, scanning it, and his expression shifted from smug to horrified. The page clearly stated, I, Ethan Bennett, hereby acknowledge that I hold no ownership, title, or financial claim to Bennett Vineyards, its subsidiaries or estate properties. You tricked me, he snapped. No, I said calmly, you underestimated me. He slammed his hand on the desk. You can't do this, I'll fight it. You can try, I said. But you'll be fighting the man who built this vineyard, my father, and the law he left behind, and you'll lose. He stared at me, eyes full of fury and disbelief. For the first time, I think he realized he'd never really known me at all. Ethan stormed out without another word, slamming the door so hard the glass rattled. I stood there for a long time, staring at the papers he'd signed. The rain started again, soft, steady, washing the dust from the vines. It felt like cleansing, like something new beginning. Marco appeared in the doorway a few minutes later. Everything okay, Mrs. Bennett? I smiled faintly. Better than okay. He nodded once, then gestured toward the window. You see that rainbow, first one all season, maybe that's a sign. I looked out, and for the first time since Ethan left, I actually believed it. 3 weeks passed before I heard from Ethan again. 3 weeks of sunlight over the vineyard, laughter from the workers, and quiet evenings where the house didn't echo with his voice anymore. For a while I believed I'd finally closed that chapter. Then came the newspaper article. I was pouring coffee when Marco rushed into the office, holding a folded newspaper, breathless. "Mrs. Bennett, you should see this." He handed it to me. Right on the front page of the Sonoma Chronicle, the headline read, "Bennett Vineyards under investigation for financial mismanagement. Former co-owner speaks out." My stomach dropped. Beneath the headline was Ethan's face, polished, smug, perfectly lit under the words "exclusive interview." I read the first lines aloud. "Ethan Bennett, former co-owner of Bennett Vineyards, reveals years of hidden debt and questionable bookkeeping practices under his ex-wife, Claire Bennett. Sources claim a potential misuse of estate funds following the death of Robert Bennett, the vineyard's founder." I couldn't breathe. He'd gone public. By noon the phone was ringing non-stop. Investors, journalists, distributors, everyone wanted a statement. The story spread like wildfire, twisting, mutating. People whispered about bankruptcy, about scandal, about the widow who couldn't manage her father's empire. One headline called me the heiress who let it rot. When Charles finally reached me, his voice was tight. "Claire, I just read it. It's malicious defamation, but the damage—" "I know," I said quietly. "He's not just trying to ruin the business, he's trying to ruin me." "Then we'll fight back." "No," I said, standing by the window. "We'll outsmart him." That evening I called Marco and Sophia, the vineyard's operations manager. We sat in the tasting room, the smell of oak barrels and wine filling the silence. "He's spreading lies," I said, "but lies are only dangerous when people believe them, so we're going to show them the truth." Sophia leaned forward. "What do you mean?" "Transparency," I said. "Every number, every report, every audit since my father died open to the public. If he wants to fight in the press, we'll fight in daylight." Marco nodded. "Turn his story against him." "Exactly." We launched the Bennett Legacy Report the next morning, a public release of the vineyard's full financial records, verified by independent auditors. I recorded a short video statement for social media. This vineyard was built on honesty, family, and hard work. My father believed integrity outlasts rumor, and so do I. I have nothing to hide. The video went viral, thousands of shares, hundreds of supportive comments, but Ethan wasn't done. 3 days later, one of our wine distributors cancelled a major contract, citing reputational risk. Then another. Then someone hacked our website, posting fake financial leaks that made it look like we were drowning in debt. Charles confirmed the source. The IP traced back to Ethan's tech consultant, Jason Trent. "He's trying to force a collapse," Charles said grimly. "Drive your value down so he can swoop in later and save the company." I slammed my hand on the desk, over my dead body. I spent the next week gathering evidence. Emails, call logs, hacked server data, all linking back to Ethan's associates. Marco even caught one of their men sneaking near the wine cellar at night, trying to photograph our private storage inventory. That was the final straw. I drove to Ethan's rented villa that night. He opened the door, startled but quickly smirking. "Claire, to what do I owe this pleasure?" "Cut the act," I said. "I know what you're doing. The leaks, the articles, the fake debts, it all traces back to you." He laughed softly. "You can't prove it." "I already can," I said, holding up my phone. "And when I'm done, everyone else will too." His face twitched, the mask slipping. "You think this place will survive without me? You think you can win?" "I already did," I said. "You just don't know it yet." He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a hiss. "You'll regret crossing me." "No," I whispered. "I'll regret ever believing in you." Then I turned and walked out. 2 days later I held a press conference at the vineyard. Cameras flashed, microphones crowded the podium. I stood beneath the oak tree, my father planted the year I was born, and spoke calmly. "Bennett Vineyards has endured droughts, wildfires, and loss. We've survived it all because we tell the truth. Today, I present evidence of the malicious actions taken against this company, actions by individuals attempting to defame and destabilize it for personal gain." I showed the logs, the signatures, the fake accounts, every shred of Ethan's sabotage. The reporters' murmurs turned to gasps. One of them even asked, "Mrs. Bennet, are you pressing charges?" I smiled slightly. "No, I'm pressing on, let the truth do the rest." Within days, Ethan's reputation began to crumble. His new consulting firm lost clients. The investor group he'd courted withdrew their support. Jason Trent was arrested for cyber tampering. And as for Ethan, he disappeared. No calls, no sightings, nothing. Until the letter arrived. It came one quiet morning, slipped under the office door. No address, no signature, just my name written in the handwriting I used to love. Inside, one line. "If you think this is over, you don't know me at all." 3 quiet months passed. Summer melted into early harvest, and for a while I believed Ethan had finally given up. The vineyard thrived again. Tourists came back, our export contracts reopened, and the Bennet name began to recover. Every evening, the smell of crushed grapes drifted from the press barn, and I could almost hear my father's laugh in the wind. Then one Saturday morning, Marco rushed into the house, white-faced. "Mrs. Bennet, he's back." Ethan had returned to Sonoma, but not quietly. He'd registered for the annual Wine Consortium auction, the same event where my father once launched our first reserve label. Except this time, Ethan wasn't bidding, he was selling. On the event list under private estates, I saw it. The Bennet Reserve Collection, presented by Ethan Bennet. My heart pounded. Those bottles weren't his. They were part of my father's heritage stock, a collection he'd promised would never be sold, only opened for family. "How did he even get them?" I asked. Marco grimaced. "The storage records show a transfer 3 weeks before he left you. Looks like he moved a few crates under the old export license. Nobody noticed until now." That evening I went to the auction. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers and champagne, and there at the center of it all was Ethan, flawless suit, younger girlfriend on his arm, smiling like the king he'd never been. When our eyes met, his smile didn't falter. He lifted his glass slightly, a mock toast. I walked straight toward him. "Selling family wine, Ethan, even for you that's low." He chuckled. "It's called business, Claire. You remember business, don't you? Those bottles were never yours." "Actually, they were ours, marital property, remember? Unless, of course," he leaned closer, "you're hiding something in those inheritance papers." My pulse quickened, so he did suspect. "You have no idea what you're talking about," I said evenly. "We'll see, I've got new lawyers, smarter ones." He turned away, but his words echoed, "New lawyers." That night I called Charles. "He's preparing a lawsuit." "Then he's walking into a trap," Charles replied. "The clause protects you, remember, but we'll need to prove the collection was part of the estate, not the marriage." "And we can," I said. "Every bottle was registered under my father's private ledger." "Then let him swing first." A week later I was served. Ethan Bennet versus Claire Bennet, dispute over shared assets and inheritance fraud. Fraud, the word strung worse than any insult he'd ever thrown at me. He wasn't just trying to take the wine. He was trying to rewrite the truth, turn me into the thief. I didn't cry this time, I didn't even panic. I just looked out at the vineyard and whispered, "All right, Ethan, let's finish this." 2 nights later, a knock came at the door. When I opened it, I froze. "Mila." She looked nervous, clutching a folder. "Can I come in?" "You have a lot of nerve showing up here." "I know, but you need to see this." She opened the folder. Inside were copies of emails between Ethan and one of my former accountants. Messages discussing hidden transactions, the same ones that had fueled the fake newspaper story. "Why are you giving me this?" I asked. She hesitated. "Because he's using me too. He said we'd build something together, but all he does is talk about destroying you. I can't be part of it anymore." Her voice trembled. "He's obsessed, Claire. This isn't about money. It's about making you suffer." With Mila's evidence, Charles and I built a case strong enough to crush Ethan's claims. But I didn't want just legal victory. I wanted truth out in the open, undeniable. So we designed something bold. The trial was scheduled for September 17th, the anniversary of my father's passing. I decided to hold a legacy tasting at the vineyard that same day. The public would witness our story, not as gossip but as heritage. We'd pour the first bottle from my father's reserve and dedicate it to every honest hand that built this land. Cameras would roll. Guests would see transparency, not scandal. "You're turning your pain into a statement," Charles said. "That's rare, Claire." "It's what Dad would have done." The courtroom smelled like polished wood and perfume. Ethan sat across from me, confident, jaw set, eyes cold. His lawyer droned about unfair distribution, concealed documents, emotional distress. Then Charles stood. "Your Honor, we have evidence showing Mr. Bennett's deliberate deception, cyber manipulation, and theft of estate property." He handed over Mila's folder. When the judge flipped through the pages, Ethan's confidence flickered. Then came the question that cut him. "Mr. Bennett, did you or did you not instruct a third party to alter financial records belonging to Bennett Vineyards?" He hesitated. "I don't recall." "Perhaps this recording will help refresh your memory," Charles said, pressing play. Ethan's own voice filled the room. "Just make it look like she took the money. I don't care how." Gasps echoed. His lawyer paled. Ethan's eyes darted toward Mila in the back row, betrayal written all over his face. The judge's gavel came down hard. "Case dismissed. Full ownership to Mrs. Bennett. Mr. Bennett, you are hereby fined and barred from any future claim against Bennett Vineyards." Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed again, but this time the questions were different. "Mrs. Bennett, how does it feel to finally win? What's next for the vineyard?" I smiled for the first time in months, to keep growing like my father taught me. But that night, alone in my kitchen, I couldn't shake Mila's warning. "He's obsessed, it's not about money anymore." And she was right. Because when I stepped outside to breathe the night air, I saw something in the distance, on the edge of the vineyard, near the old barn. A flicker of light. Then another. Then the smell of smoke. The smell hit me first, that bitter mix of smoke and oak. By the time I reached the barn, the vines around it glowed orange, flames licking up the wooden posts like hungry hands. "Call the fire crew," I yelled to Marco as I grabbed a hose, the spray pitiful against the blaze. Sparks leapt into the air, carried by the wind toward the storage shed, the one holding my father's reserve bottles. Then through the haze I saw him, a shadow near the pickup road, still watching. "Ethan," I screamed, "what did you do?" He didn't run. He just stood there, lit by the fire's reflection, face blank, almost peaceful. "You took everything," he said. "Now you'll feel what it's like to lose it." Before I could answer, sirens wailed in the distance. He turned and disappeared into the vines. Hours later, after the firefighters left and the last ember dimmed, I walked through the wreckage. Most of the barn was gone. But in the ashes of my father's desk, something metal glinted, a fireproof box. Inside was a single envelope, the handwriting instantly familiar. "For Claire, if she ever doubts what she's worth." My hands trembled as I opened it. "Daughter, I built this vineyard for family, not for blood, but for those who protect it. If the vines ever burn, remember this. You are the root, not the branches. Everything regrows from you." Tucked behind the letter was a small key, labeled Vault 17, Sonoma Bank. The next morning, Charles and I opened the vault. Inside was another folder, the real final amendment to my father's will. It stated that upon my father's death, a trust worth nearly twice the vineyard's value had been established, but it could only activate when I chose to sever my marriage completely. Ethan had never stood a chance. The inheritance was never money, it was freedom. I laughed through tears. He tried to destroy what he could never own. Charles smiled softly. "And you, Claire, rebuilt what no fire could touch." A year later, the vines grew again, greener, stronger. Tourists returned. Our new label, Phoenix Reserve, won its first award. As I poured a glass for the judge who'd handled our case, she smiled. "Quite a name you chose." I raised my glass toward the hills. It felt fitting. Some things have to burn before they bloom. When people ask me what it felt like, watching the vineyard burn, watching the man I once loved walk into the flames he started, I tell them the truth. It didn't feel like losing everything. It felt like being freed from it. Because sometimes what burns away isn't the past, it's the illusion that you still need it. Ethan thought the inheritance was money, land, power, but my father knew better. He built this vineyard not for control, but for character, to see if I could protect what he started without becoming what destroyed it. And I did. Today, when I walk between the rows of new vines, I still hear the echo of his voice. The roots remember the hands that planted them. So I keep planting, not just grapes, but peace, courage, and the quiet promise that no betrayal, no fire, no loss will ever own me again. Because the vineyard wasn't his, it was never even mine, it was ours, and now it's reborn.